You're muted.
Okay. Can't hear you, Andy.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay, I wasn't muted. I don't know what happened to my mic, but fix it. Okay, great. All right, let's call it to order. So welcome to the Lake Bluff District 65 Board of Education special meeting for Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Carrie, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Andy Duran.
Present.
Lauren Hirsch.
Present.
Mark Berry.
Present.
Tim Penich.
Present.
And Carrie Steinbach present.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we can begin. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Great. And tonight's reading of the tonight's reading of the mission, vision, and values for Lake Bluff School District 65. I'll just take this one to make it easy. So the mission statement is to provide each student with quality instruction, learning opportunities, and educational environments that inspire academic achievement, personal growth, and responsible citizenship. Our vision statement is excellence in education, enthusiasm for life, every student, every day. And in lieu of doing two public comments, we're going to do public comment and save that for the end of the meeting. So I will jump right to item 4, a discussion on our strategic planning process. So I'm turning over to Lisa or to Crystal.
We'll let Lisa start us out.
I'm happy
Okay.
to start. Thanks for your patience with my video. So we are really, first of all, I just want to say I'm really grateful to the board for the direction it gave us in terms of finding the right person and the right facilitator. Crystal has been amazing to work with. I think you'll see tonight. Additionally, a lot of gratitude to Amy Kotnick, who's been working really hard to pull this process together and make sure everything is smooth. And finally, an intense, gracious attitude towards everyone who's on the team, giving up a lot of time. Last week, we had our first 2 meetings. The first orientation was over Zoom for 2 hours. And the second meeting was a 7-hour retreat, as you know, that took place off campus. I can tell you that the group was focused, was thoughtful, was inquisitive and curious, and the most of those comments can aptly describe the 6th and 7th graders in the room to a T, for sure, as well as the adults who are there as well, and the community members. We have a representative group of all grade levels in the school in terms of our parent community. And then we have staff representation from our union, as well as from our classified staff or administrative assistants, and then community members as well. So we had a really great first retreat that went over a lot of data. I want to thank Jay Kahn and Tracy Rourke and Margaret Ryan for putting together the data for us to review, and for Crystal for being here tonight to give you an update and hopefully get some feedback from you on our process.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me. I am so excited to be working with this team. I agree with Lisa. The team is, they were very excited. They were very engaged. And it's a long day, but the team was there until the last minute with us. It was really amazing. I don't think that I can say enough how wonderful your students are. I do this work all over the country with lots and lots of different districts. And one of our pillars to our work at CEC is including students in the process. As many times as I've done this, what I have not experienced is such a thoughtful, inquisitive, solution-seeking group of students than we have in this group. They are instrumental to this process. And in the midst of the conversations and the heavy discussions that are happening, they are right there with the adults. We made it really clear that for our strategic planning work, there are no titles. There's no, if you're sitting at a table with your teacher, you know, your voice is just as impactful as everyone else's. And they heard us and they really lived up to it. So kudos to you. I've said this to the team already. Kudos to your staff, your community, what you're doing with your students is remarkable. And it was fully on display at our first meeting. So I just wanted to reiterate that to you. If you have not heard that, they're amazing, amazing kids. So let me start. I'm going to actually start from a slide deck. I think that will be an easier way to kind of get at this a little bit, give you a little bit of background, how we kind of work through the agenda, some of the activities. So let me share my screen really quickly.
Crystal, can I ask a question before we get
Absolutely.
into? I'm sorry to interrupt. And maybe you're going to dive right into the question. So I don't know.
Mhm.
Can you or Lisa or somebody who's involved explain to us what you perceive to be the board's role in all of this?
Great question. The board's role is to, number one, support and oversee the process. What I really like about the way that we are setting up these meetings with you after we've had these longer retreats is it allows the board to step back, support the process, but not overtake the process. Really, the board's role is to ensure that the process is one that is of quality, and then support and give feedback along the way so that when we get to the end of this process and Lisa comes to present or recommend the new strategic plan to you, what we don't want is for you to be caught off guard by anything, or if the team is going in a direction that might be in opposition to the direction that the board wants to go. That's feedback that we really want along the way so that we can make sure that at the end of this process that we have a plan that is that everyone can buy into. So the team, all of the different stakeholders on the team, but the board as well. And that's really important because you are the entity that will be approving the strategic plan, even though it's recommended by Lisa. So really the board is a support and then the final approver of the strategic plan.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Any other questions about that? Okay. All right, so let's get started. And I'm going to start with a slide that has a lot of stuff going on, but I think it's really important to explain the strategic planning process that we're going to take and what that looks like. What is the team's role versus what is the role of the district once the plan is developed? So if on the screen, you'll see there's 3 columns here. There's where are we now is in the middle, and that's our first retreat. That's where we just finished our data retreat, which is all the information I'm going to share today. The idea behind this retreat is to figure out what is your current reality. This is where you're looking at all of your data. You're determining what are stakeholder, their thoughts about the district, what are some real strengths, what are some areas of opportunity, to really get a good sense of the environment of the school district. That's really important as a baseline for us, because then our next session will be this first column, which is where do we want to be? And this is where we are actually coming together to think outside of the box. when we're thinking about our students, our scholars, our kids, where do we want them to be 5, 7, even 10 years from now? You know, when you think about it, 2030 is only 7 years away. There are students in your system that will be leaving you around 2030. We don't know what the world is going to be like in 2030, but the onus is on this team to really say, let's look at some of these forward thinking organizations. What does the research say? What does the business world say that they're looking for? You know, what types of things are we trying to prepare kids for beyond school? So it's not just getting to high school, but it's what competencies do we really need to make sure that our students have? So that's that visioning retreat. Where do we want to be? Who do we want our students to be? Who do we want to be as district staff? Who do we want our system to be so that we can support the students to become who they need to be? So that's our next retreat. And then our final retreat is, we know where we are, we know where we want to be. Now, how do we get there? And that's the real setting those goals and strategies to really dictate the work over the next 5 years. So these three are really what the strategic planning team is going to focus on. Once the plan is developed, then it goes to the district. And then this is where the district comes in. So the district teams then take the strategic plan and they start building out action plans. Now, what are we actually going to do in year 1, in year 2, in year 3? How does that progression look? How can we continue to grow over these 5 years? So we're not just developing a plan today and revisiting it in 5 years. Part of living your strategic plan is building plans that allow monitoring and adjusting in the midst of your action planning and your implementation of your plan. Because what we want is, we want your district teams to, on a regular basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, trimester, whatever it is, to have some type of cyclical process that is always revisiting the strategies on your plan. How are we doing? Let's check on metrics. So that's another really important thing in action planning, is developing those metrics. What are some short-term goals for us? What are some longer-term goals? What are we looking at to make sure that we're actually making progress towards these higher level goals, so that we can then report out? So you should expect, as a board, regular report outs on all of your goals for strategic planning. How's it going? What are you learning? Here's our next steps. So that conversation with not just the board, but with staff, with stakeholders. So it's a very transparent, informative process that keeps everyone in the know, so that people feel like they have ownership and that they're a part of this change and improvement that's happening in your system, versus this being isolated more with just district staff, which is what we see in a lot of districts. So this is our full process. So while our strategic planning process will be completed by April sometime, the actual continuous improvement process will continue on a regular basis over the next 5 years. Any thoughts or questions about that before we move on to this last retreat that we had? Okay, awesome. So let's talk about the data retreat. And so these were our outcomes for the data retreat. So we had a few things that we were focusing on. Number one, we started off looking at our own perceptions. So in table groups, as individuals, what do I feel is going really well in our district? And then what might be some challenges that I feel like we need to work on? So we spent some time doing that. Then we took some time really reviewing survey data to look and see what are others' perceptions of what's going well, and then what challenges we may have. Then that third part is listening to data presentations. And the data presentations, we'll talk about those in a minute. We looked at student achievement, we looked at climate and culture data, and we looked at finance, facilities and technology data. So those are the three big types of data that we reviewed. And then the teams came together, discussed all of that data, what were some of the strengths, the challenges, and then they conducted a SWOT analysis, which identified strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so those are some of the documents that you were able to review before our meeting today. And we'll go through each of those. So the first activity, again, was each table group. Well, I'll start individually. Each participant was asked to spend a few minutes just reflecting personally on their perceptions of the district. And we asked each person to think about what were they most proud, and then what were some challenges. And so each of the tables, or each individual person, wrote down an idea on Post-its, and then they shared their Post-its, consolidated them, and came up with one team poster, looks something like this, that represented their table's thoughts about what they were most proud about, and then what the challenges were. So each table did these, then we shared them out with a large group. And it's always amazing how much similarity there is, and then how you might have some outliers. And the one thing that you'll find through this process is outliers will not make your final document. What we're really looking for through this process are what are the trends that we're hearing from multiple stakeholder groups in multiple areas, and those are the things that bubble to the top for your strategic plan. So then we took these charts of each person's perception, and I took them and turned them into these tables. So first of all, let me apologize. There were a few typos, so I apologize for that. Thank you for being flexible. And some of them were a little comical.
I think most of them we got corrected before.
Okay, good.
So, yep.
Good. And so I took the posters, put them into these charts, which is one of the charts you looked at prior to the meeting. And so that's where that came from. The chart that had each table where they outlined what they were most proud and what their challenges were. Did you have any questions about this process?
I have a quick question. I don't know if now's the right time, but you mentioned the outliers, and those kind of fall to the side. If those aren't in conflict with some of the other things, how do we ensure that we still know that that's there? Because even if it's just one or a few people who have those concerns, I think, or not necessarily concerns, they could be positive feelings as well. We want to make sure those are still noted, even if they're not ingrained in the plan.
Definitely, great question. All of the artifacts that we develop they're in a shared folder for the team and the district leadership, as well as being uploaded onto your specific strategic planning website on your district website. And everything is there, transparent for anyone and everyone to see. So all of the documents that were developed from each of our meetings will be there. It's also something that, and this is such a great question, because many times people feel like the strategic plan is the only thing we can do, where really your strategic plan just focuses on the most critical things to do. So other things will be happening in the district, and it might be some of the things that may not have necessarily fallen onto the strategic plan, but you'll see as you kind of go through some of the documents and as we move forward through the next couple meetings, you'll see that there's a lot of times some adjacent topics that maybe it might not be the large strategy on your strategic plan, but there might be 3 or 4 things that really can be done in conjunction with that, with only a little bit of an extra lift. So those are the types of things that I will be hopefully working with your district team to build those action plans so that they are able to include some of those, lower hanging fruit that are easy to kind of get at, that might work well with what's on the strategic plan, or it might be something totally different that the district might say, this might not be a priority for year 1 or 2, but maybe this is something we need to start investigating. So what's on your strategic plan are actual actions of things you're trying to change, where you might say that in year 3, we really kind of want to start looking at, I don't know, developing a basket weaving course, right? Maybe that rose to the top out of your strategic plan. And the district may say, okay, it's not a priority strategy, but let's start looking into it. And so there will be many more of those things happening than you will see on the actual strategic planning document. Great question.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so that was activity 1. So the other part of that activity is looking at the survey data to see what other stakeholders think of the district. And so we looked at student surveys, staff surveys, parent surveys. We looked at the 5 essentials. We looked at Thrive data. Lisa, help me. Was there another data point? I feel like there was a third one.
The 5 essentials, you said. The
5 essentials.
yeah, the Thrive data and the HumanX data. We also
HumanX.
looked,
And
the
yes.
climate culture data from staff.
Yep, that's what I was thinking of. So we had each of the teams, we gave them all of the data and had them kind of wrestle with it. What are students saying? What are staff saying? What are parents saying? And so what we had them do, because there was so much data, we had them split it up. So for example, one table took the 5 essentials and they were responding as parents. What are the parents saying in 5 essentials? Or we may be looking at just LBES on 5 essentials. What are they saying about the elementary system on 5 essentials? Where another team might have done just the middle school. What are they saying on 5 essentials? So we looked at all of that data and we were asking again for strengths and opportunities. And those posters looked something like this. So this was a group who was looking at student data. And so this is how they came up with their strengths and opportunities. And again, this was captured in the chart that you looked at earlier. And as you can see, I literally took what was on the poster and put it right into the chart. Okay. Thoughts about this process?
I have a question. So it says table 5 students, but this is not necessarily the table of just students coming up with the positive and negative, correct?
Yes, great question.
Okay.
So every table had a mix of stakeholder groups. So they had district staff, district administration, parents and or community, and students, every single table.
And
So when
staff.
it says table 5 students, this is table 5 who was looking at the student survey data. Yes,
Thank
great
you.
question. Sure. So then we listened to the 3 different reports, and the reports were phenomenal, very, very high quality. And Each table group then, they took notes as they listened to each report. Again, thinking about how are we performing well? What sounds like some challenges? One of the important pieces was for the presenters not to give their opinions or not to analyze the data for the team. We want the team to wrestle with really, what does this mean? So it was just presenting charts, just presenting data, and then the tables had table conversations to think about what are the strengths and what are the challenges. And this was the last activity before they developed their SWOT. So they just at their tables talked about it, discussed what they felt were some key takeaways from each of the three.
And just as a reminder, the actual presentations are all on the website as well. So anybody can view these 3 presentations. And also the strategic plan members of the committee had hard copies of all the presentations with them at the table with the data color coded. So everything exactly as it looks online was also given to every strategic plan member so they could have it at their table to talk about even after the presentation was over.
Yes. And I would just like to say again to Amy, thank you so much. She made amazing binders for everyone that will house all of their documents through strategic planning, which will mirror what you will find on the website. So whether you're a board member or community member, anyone can go on and see everything that we've done. So what we ask them to reflect on, again, is here on the slide, because there was also some comparison data that was discussed, comparing to others and comparing to the past. Okay, so once we finish those 3 big activities, at this point, we have 1 hour left, and everyone has had such amazing discussions, such amazing conversations. But now it's time to take all of that data analysis and pull it together and prioritize out of everything we've read today from surveys, discussed about our own personal preferences or perceptions, listen to the presentations from the district. Here are the things that rise to the top. And I want to take a minute to talk about each of these 4, because it's important that we're really clear on what questions the teams were actually answering. So a SWOT analysis is looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And typically, strengths, that's something we don't really have to discuss. It's what you're doing well. Weaknesses and opportunities, though, is one that can frequently get confusing when you're trying to identify, is this issue that I'm thinking about a weakness or is it an opportunity? The way that I like to delineate them is across the top, strengths and weaknesses are actually things that the district is trying right now to implement and have an impact on. Strengths, you're doing well. Weaknesses, you're not doing well. Opportunities are different because these are things that might be happening in pockets in the district. Maybe one school or one teacher team is doing a great job, but it's not systemic. So this might be something that the district knows they need to address, but they haven't made district-wide efforts to try and improve yet. So that's the way we delineate the weaknesses and opportunities. Even in the midst of doing this work, however, there's still conversations all the time with the tables. We're not quite sure, does it go here? Does it go there? Because of course, there might be some things the district is trying to do that might be behind the scenes and people don't know. So they may put it as an opportunity where the district says, well, it really might be more of a weakness because we really have been trying to address that over the last year. So this is where we do some movement between different areas, and I'll share an example of that with you in just a moment. And then threats are things that impact the school system, but that the school system has no control over. And if you read through the threats, you probably can see how those ended up that way. Social media is probably the biggest one. Every single strategic plan I'm doing right now, social media is a threat because the school has no control over it. But good gracious, it is definitely impacting what's happening in schools. So any questions or thoughts on these 4 categories and how we landed here?
I have a quick question on opportunities. Those are just things that have been started or small groups are doing them. Can it also be something that hasn't been touched at all or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so these were the directions that were given to the team. They needed to think about all 3 of the things that they have heard or learned that day, and then categorize them. We spent a lot of time here, but much of the time was already identifying things that they had discussed throughout the day. So it really was pulling it all together and prioritizing on their SWOT chart. So this is an example of one of the charts. We had them draw them just like this. And then at the end, we did a gallery walk. So each table could see what every other table had on their SWOT analysis. Because one of the things that we usually find is after such a long day, there might be something that you talked about early in the morning that your team may have forgotten about. So it was just that one last review of, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot I heard that this morning. We need to go back and add that to our list. Because again, what we're looking for are trends. We're looking for what things are coming about at multiple tables that multiple teams are discussing. And then those are the things that rise to the top. So again, these charts, the chart paper was just transferred into an actual chart. And then that's how we did our consolidation.
So Crystal, I have one quick question about this. I noticed this a couple times in looking over these tables in advance, like under both on the poster paper there and on your chart, when you look under weaknesses and it says things like equity, SEL, mental health, et cetera, are those what people are perceiving the district is not doing well as a weakness, or are people perceiving that those are, I guess I'm confused, the difference between having those under weaknesses versus threats. And I'm sure there's discussion about that, but I'm wondering if you could clarify that a little bit.
Absolutely. So SEL and mental health is a very common weakness these days because many school systems feel like they need to do more. And speaking from the conversations that I heard that day, that's what that means. So the district does have SEL supports that they have in place and that they are utilizing with students. But I think overwhelmingly, and Lisa and Amy, please feel free to chime in. Much of the conversation was that the needs are so great that the district needs to do more.
Yeah, I heard that
That's
also.
accurate.
And part of it was also maybe our efforts just haven't gotten as far as we want them to yet. They're planned, but we haven't gotten to where we need to be. So for example, looking at our tier 1 social emotional learning and our curriculum and making sure that that's fully embedded into all of our classrooms. Something we're working on that's planned for that we just haven't gotten through yet. The work hasn't been completed. And then the piece with equity, I think is just, that's again, something we're trying to address. We're still in the beginning stages, unfortunately, of this is part of it, of examining and having the current reality taken into account, and then really, hopefully, finding a way to embed this in the larger plan and have some action planning and metrics around it. So I think that's where those were, but I have to say, those were kind of, in my opinion, Crystal, you could say if you felt differently, but I think that those couple too were like were toggling between weaknesses and opportunities. Some tables felt like they were strengths. Some stakeholder groups felt like they were more strengths than others. So really we had to get consensus with these mixed stakeholder tables to where the majority of people were feeling like it was. And just like anything, the power of this is in the process and in the discussion. So like to Tim's question, there were things that came up that probably won't show up on the chart, but as an administrative team, we're already talking about, you know, here's something I heard, here's something that the kids were talking about. This is something that we can address right away or something we can use in our current planning without, you know, kind of it showing up on the bigger plan. So I would just say those were big topics for us to discuss. And, you know, for me, whether it winds up in a weakness or an opportunity, either way, we have direction that these are things that are concerns coming out from this planning team. And when we get to action planning, right, that's the goal, right? What do we actually want to see happen with this? What are we missing in terms of like where we're trying to get and then how we're going to get there? So I think the fact that they showed up on the chart in these two areas is a good thing.
Yes. And one, I'll give an actual student conversation that was happening at one table. One of the students was talking about this amazing program that they have at the middle school for SEL and equity. And she was talking about how it gives such a sense of belonging to the students. And, you know, they're learning about neurodiversity and how it's okay to be who you are and to be different. And so her comment was, this is something that needs to be pushed down to the elementary schools. Like, this is an amazing thing that we're doing at the middle school. So that's an example of conversations that were happening. So it's not a weakness in that nothing's happening and things are falling apart. It was more what might be happening in pockets that we can spread, or we need to really, we can amplify things so much more. So the students were so instrumental in those conversations.
And that one example is the Unity Club, which we know is currently an extracurricular. So it is supporting, but it's outside the school day, right? This is a student organized club. And so the idea is, does that need to be scaled up? Does that need to be formalized? You know, do opportunities need to spread from that student group to other aspects of the district?
Can you clarify one more time the difference between opportunities and weaknesses, like what definition you gave them? Because some of the weaknesses I keep thinking are actual like opportunities for us to grow or change.
So
I guess maybe I'm being too positive, but.
Well, weaknesses are things that where the district is already making efforts to try and make a difference, and maybe it's not working. Maybe it's not working system-wide. Maybe it's taken hold in pockets, but really there needs to be more of a push. Or like SEL mental health, the district does have like a tier 1, but maybe it's just not enough. So we need to ramp it up. Where like, opportunities are things like the, oh, sorry, was that you, Lisa?
No, if you want, Crystal, I was just thinking, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think communication is a good example of this. Like the district has ramped up efforts a lot in communication. But I think for me, again, there's multiple stakeholders in the room, right? There's different groups. And so we may be making great efforts, but if the perception is still there that we're not doing what we need to do, then that's something we need to know about and we may need to adjust. So I hear you. And I think this is a difficult thing always when we're doing these analyses, like what's the difference? But in my mind, it's kind of to Crystal's point of like that diagonal of weaknesses and opportunities are all things that we have control over, that we can start working on either more or differently or start at all, where the strengths and threats are sort of like, we've already got this going. How are we going to keep it going? Or these are things we just can't control at all. So like, I think at some point it's about that power of conversation and getting to consensus. And what shows up on the chart are really just things that we need to pay attention to on that diagonal, if that makes sense.
Yes. And I think that's a really great point, because when you see the actual strategic plan, it will be built from the weaknesses and opportunities. That's what you'll see on your plan. So just to tell you, so our next step, once all the tables finish their SWOT, then we took them and put them into charts. So notice these are all the strengths from all the tables. And then what we do is we literally just rank them. How many tables talked about students, for example, or staff? And so basically that ranking is really how we end up with the facilitator's recommendations. These are the ones that multiple tables referenced as a strength or as an opportunity. So that is where this bottom right box came from. Some of the language may be a little different from some of the tables simply because multiple tables might have different ways of saying it, or it might need some clarifying statements based on conversations that were had. So then that's where those come from. Okay, so we did that with strengths. And again, you've seen these. And then these are the strengths that rose to the top. Okay. And then again, we did that same thing with weaknesses. Now, this is an example. Notice this one is crossed out because once we reviewed the charts and Lisa and her team reviewed it, they said, well, this really is more of an opportunity than it is a weakness. So that's why that one is crossed out, because then it was moved to an opportunity. And that was something that, again, within the district, you would know what types of things you have actively been working on versus things that you haven't been working on so much.
Yeah, so one of those things too, so the administrative team had an opportunity yesterday to get together and review the facilitator's recommendations.
Yes.
And, you know, we also, from our perspective, added one thing as well, that we feel is a big issue for us, which is attendance and tardies. And that unfortunately did not show up on that list, but as a stakeholder group that is really feeling that we are seeing the effects of attendance and kids coming late to school, we felt like that's something that should have risen to the top. But obviously this is part of this process of getting feedback. And when the survey goes out on this, we'll see, you know, where people fall on it.
And really quickly, thank you for the clarification earlier, Crystal. And I just want to say, Lauren and I actually have to duck out in a couple minutes to get to a school event. So
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt. And if you see us happen to leave, Anne's got the script to close us out later tonight. So I appreciate it. Sorry, we have to leave a little bit early. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. And actually, I can go through these because you've seen them already. And the process was the same. So to talk about next steps, our next steps are, or after the retreat, our next steps were to analyze their SWOT data, consolidate, come up with one SWOT for the whole team. I shared it, like Lisa just said, with the leadership team to get feedback from them, because we wanted to make sure it was solid for you guys today and for the community focus groups. The one thing we are really impressing on the team is that every stakeholder group on the team needs to be part of our cheerleading team to go out and encourage community members, staff, students to respond to the survey, to give their feedback on how the team is doing along the way. So
an update, I'm sorry, an update on the survey really quickly. So that will go out to the community tomorrow. We are also going to be asking 4th or 8th grade students to complete the survey. Our staff will receive the survey tomorrow. And we also have from Lake Forest High School, a list of Lake Bluff students who are there right now in the high school who will also receive the survey and have a chance to weigh in on their feedback as well. And additionally, as you know, we've created the community opt-in email. That group of 51 individuals who have so far signed up for community updates will also be sent this as their first communication from the district and opportunity to weigh in. So we really feel like we are going to be spreading the survey out to a lot of folks. So to that point, if you do run into people, now's the time to encourage them to fill it out. We also have surpassed our 20% on the 5 essentials for this year. So people are on a roll, they're filling out surveys. So we can just like slide in there with another one and tell them to take a 5-question survey and give us their thoughts. So
That's right.
That's great news, both on the number of people that have signed up for the email list. That's like a 1/100th of Lake Bluff. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And great news on the 5 essentials too. Thanks for filling us in on that.
Mhm. Okay, so before you guys have a chance to leave, let me share my.
we have an opportunity for public comment as well before we finish. So
Okay. Any feedback for the team on the draft SWOT? I do know, Lisa, we have to add in attendance and tardies here.
yeah, that wound up in the other one, but it
Yep.
didn't on this one. Yep.
I have a question as opposed to feedback.
Mhm.
I wonder if Lisa could comment, or Crystal as well. Were any of these surprising?
For me, it actually wasn't surprising. I'm sorry, I'm in the dark. I am literally the most energy efficient person on earth because like everywhere I go, the lights turn off. So staff showed up on every single poster as a strength. Our students showed up on every single poster as a strength. That was not surprising, but actually really validating and to what I've heard as well. I think that, again, financial stability, materials and resources, I think the conversations at the tables were enlightening to folks just to, in a good way, to think about how really lucky we are in Lake Bluff with what we have and what's going well. So we had a couple people even in the meeting say, you know, I'm just taking a moment to reflect. I'm just realizing how lucky I am to be here. You know, some people were saying that, especially folks who had been in other places, worked in other places or lived in other places. And on the weaknesses and opportunities side of things, no, I really didn't feel like anything came out that was super surprising to me, or on the threats. So I feel like that's a good thing. I think there were surprising anecdotes at the table, or there were surprising comments. There were things from our students that they said that were put some light bulbs off in people's heads, like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I can't underestimate or overestimate or overemphasize how involved our students were and what specific information they were able to provide. That really was very helpful to the process of us kind of seeing inside the school day of a student, or what their perceptions are of how things are going, on all fronts. You know, I have to congratulate the teachers at the middle school for you know, grabbing kids they knew would provide a diverse perspective and also really participate. So I don't think so, Mark. That was a long answer, but I don't think so. There weren't any surprises for our team.
Well,
Thanks.
I would say for me, I've never had a strategic plan where top of every table's list was students and staff as far as a strength. I've never seen that before. So again, from an outside perspective, kudos to you. It was wonderful to see.
How about, I have another question. You said that the final strategic plan will focus on the items and the opportunities and weaknesses
Yes.
corners.
Mhm.
But it seems to me that particularly the threats box
Mhm.
is something that we should not, perhaps it's not part of a strategic plan, but perhaps it's part of another initiative to be. We may not be able to predict or control outside influences, but perhaps we can plan for reaction to certain circumstances. And I don't know how that comes out of this, or should that come out of this? But I would recommend that we talk about that further, to not ignore those things and to think about how to be prepared or planful for potentially big issues.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great comment. And I think that that's important for us to think about moving forward. I mean, the administrative team is, like I said, aware, and our staff are aware of those things. And mitigating the impacts are important, and being strategic and helping each other through these issues are important. And I think we should keep those top of mind moving forward. So I'm not exactly sure what the vehicle is for having that conversation, but it's a good comment, I think.
I thought,
Well, I think, oh, sorry. Mike.
I'm sorry, just a quick follow-up. One of the things that popped to mind on some of those, it could be some committee work, like community committees having to do with some of that subject matter, perhaps might be valuable.
Well,
But
that's what I was just gonna say is like, although they're threats that's out of our control, there are opportunities that we could use, like the community involvement, the student and staff voice and input. A lot of that, you know, could be used in the issues with social media and the issues with teacher and staff shortages. I think it's a little bit like intangible, some of those things that we can grow and build upon that, because my surprise was that there was nothing of a weakness or an opportunity for like our buildings or facilities. Like everybody, those are all like up to date and doing well, but I also see that they could probably be expanded on if we are looking into like more innovative instruction, things like that. We might have to look more tangible. 5 years down the road, we might need a bigger computer lab or STEAM lab, things like that.
Mhm.
And I think that can kind of come, Carrie, from the action planning part of things. So if we're looking at, say, innovative instruction, and we create a goal around that, and we start working towards that goal, and we recognize that that resources are becoming an issue, or space, or those kinds of things are becoming an issue, then that's data that informs, you know, how we need to move forward with that action plan. So yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Mhm. And one of the things I did say to the team, and I think it's really important to say to you as a board, school systems really do not do as well of a job as we should, spotlighting the strengths and the amazing things that are happening in districts. I would encourage the conversations I heard in that room were remarkable in comparison to things that I hear in other districts. I encourage you, and you probably are already doing this, but definitely start telling this amazing story that I heard in that room, because you have some amazing things happening, wonderful staff and students. Like, there's so much to spotlight that while we want to work on the strategic plan, which is really focusing on how you're going to do things differently to move your needle, we don't want to forget about celebrating and highlighting the amazing things that are happening as well. So that's really important too.
Thanks for that feedback. That's really, really nice to hear. You know, you're right. So much of, you know, administration's focus, board focus is, you know, putting out fires and dealing with what we could improve on. It's nice to hear that we are doing some things well. I think it's amazing that staff and students came up on everyone's strength list. Again, not surprised, but I think it's amazing. So, and I also just want to say thank you for doing this meeting. Having these scheduled meetings coming up is really, really helpful to keep us on top of this process and know how it's going. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you. You're very welcome.
Does anybody have anything else, or do we want to get to opportunity for public comment, Lisa?
I just had one thing to
Yeah.
say, just kind of piggybacking on that. I do feel like in our board meetings of late, we've done a really good job, whoever is preparing them, that we do highlight some positive things going on in school of our strengths. So like our teachers or the students and things that's going on. I just want to, maybe future board agenda item could be that we make sure we highlight something, if not every month, every couple months, of like celebrations that we can pat ourselves on the back for a little bit. Not us, but you guys as the administration.
I agree,
appreciate
Carrie.
that.
That's been
Yeah.
great.
And we love it too. I think for us, we've thought we need to highlight more of our staff. We've really focused on bringing in students and student accomplishment and student achievement, which is our goal. That's our obligation and our ultimate goal. But we also have some super gifted staff and dedicated staff that are really doing some amazing things. And so as an administrative team, we've talked a lot about that too. Like, how do we just highlight some of the work of our staff as well? And let them talk about all the things they have to celebrate. So that's a great reminder about that.
Did anyone have any feedback on the draft SWOT, the actual content for the team?
And we will review all the survey data too, as a team as well, at our next retreat. So I'm looking forward to seeing hopefully a lot of participation and seeing what the rest of the stakeholders have to say about the chart.
Yes.
Can I ask one question? Sorry. I know the plan will focus on weaknesses and opportunities, but are there ways to ensure that our strengths are still being, even though it's something we're good at, we're still paying attention to those items? Is that incorporated as well going forward?
So I think the, right, Crystal, remind me if I'm wrong, but the strategic plan is a one-pager so that we can just have it really ready and like so quick that everyone sees it and knows exactly what our goals are and our metrics are. But there's going to be a lot of descriptive matter around that. There's going to be a lot of context that's sort of in a narrative form as front matter. And then, you know, after the plan, that will be kind of packaged together on the website or wherever we see the plan. And I feel like that's a perfect opportunity to highlight the strengths of the district in that narrative context, and celebrating, kind of like we do at the beginning of our AFR, the annual financial report that you have, the historical and contextual data around, or information around our data. That would be the place that we would do that. And then we'll present nationally too. Just kidding. I'm going to get you to present, Tim, with me on that.
All right, well, should we take an opportunity for public comment?
Sure.
Does anybody have anything else? Okay, so at every Board of Education meeting, we do offer the opportunity for members of the public to address the board. So if there's anybody on the Zoom tonight who would like to make a public comment, feel free just to unmute yourself, make a comment. If you're doing so, please do identify yourself by using your full name when you start talking. And did we have any written comment?
I didn't receive any
Nothing?
written comment, and I don't see
Okay.
anything in the chat.
Wonderful, thanks, guys. All right, does anybody have anything else before we adjourn?
As a reminder, Crystal's going right into a town hall meeting right after this, right? So community members will have an opportunity without administration there, without boards there to give some feedback or hear a little bit about the process, have their questions answered. So also encourage people to attend those because we had a lot of folks who wanted to participate in strategic planning, but the time commitment was too much. So these were the opportunities that we added. So we have one tonight, we have one tomorrow afternoon. And obviously this meeting is being recorded and will be placed in with the strategic planning on the webpage also. So, so that's happening soon.
Will the next meeting be recorded so we can watch it if we can't do the community meets?
I think we decided not to record the town hall meetings. So
Okay.
the town hall focus groups are just for Crystal to gather information, kind of like so that people can be honest and not feel nervous about sharing anything that would be placed on the website. So it's nice to have both types of, you know, something that is recorded, that you can hear the discussion, but then also have opportunities for people to share things anonymously if they want.
Of course.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for that reminder. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn the March 8, 2023 Board of Education special meeting at 7:01 p.m.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
All right.
Wonderful to
favor?
meet all of you.
Aye.
All
Thank
good.
you,
Aye.
Crystal.
Sorry, guys.
We're all good.
Wonderful
Crystal, thank
meeting
you so
all.
much.
You are
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Crystal.
welcome. And I look forward to seeing you after our next meeting.
Thanks.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Okay.
We're
have a good
adjourned. Thanks,
evening.
guys.
Good luck. Good luck.
Bye, all.
Thanks.